I swear, if you had asked me that morning whether Zane would ever kiss me, I would have laughed in your face. Zane had been my best friend for almost 4 years. We met during our first semester at college after getting paired together for a group project neither of us wanted. He was loud, confident, athletic, and somehow managed to make friends with every single person he met. I was the opposite. My name is Kareem. I kept mostly to myself, spent too much time gaming, and preferred quiet nights over parties. Somehow, despite being completely different, Zane and I clicked almost immediately. Everyone knew us together. If you saw Zane, I was probably nearby. If you saw me, chances were Zane would appear 5 minutes later carrying coffee or making some stupid joke. The problem was that somewhere along the way, I started liking him, really liking him, and that was a terrible idea because Zane was straight, at least as far as anyone knew. He dated girls, he talked about girls. Girls practically threw themselves at him. Meanwhile, I became very good at pretending I didn't notice how attractive my best friend was. I told myself it would eventually disappear. It didn't. By junior year, we had moved into the same apartment with 2 other friends, Mason and Tyler. It worked surprisingly well. The apartment was always loud, somebody was always cooking something, and there was never enough space in the fridge. Zane's room was directly across from mine, which honestly felt like both a blessing and a curse, because sometimes we'd stay up until 2 in the morning talking. Sometimes we'd order food and watch terrible movies together while everyone else was asleep. Sometimes he'd walk into my room, throw himself onto my bed, and complain about his latest relationship. And every single time, I'd remind myself that none of it meant anything. He was my best friend. That was all. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. One Friday afternoon, I came home from class to find Zane sitting on our kitchen counter eating cereal straight from the box. "You're late," he said. I had class. Liar. I dropped my backpack beside the couch. Why would I lie about having class? He pointed his spoon at me. "Because Tyler said you were talking to that guy from your economics class." I blinked. "You mean Daniel?" "The tall one." He asked about the homework. Zane narrowed his eyes. "Uh-huh." I laughed. "Why do you care?" He shrugged casually, but his attention stayed on me. "Just asking." Mason walked into the kitchen carrying a bag of chips. Zane's been interrogating everyone all afternoon. "I'm gathering information," Zane said. "About Kareem's love life?" Zane looked offended. "I'm being supportive." I rolled my eyes and grabbed a bottle of water. And the thing about Zane was that he got weird whenever I mentioned dating. Not angry, not jealous, just weird. If I talked about a guy, he'd ask questions. Too many questions. What's he like? Are you actually interested? Do you think he'll ask you out? At first I assumed he was just being a good friend, but sometimes it felt different. Sometimes he'd go quiet afterward. Sometimes he'd suddenly want to hang out. Sometimes he'd make jokes that didn't really sound like jokes. That afternoon, Tyler burst into the apartment carrying grocery bags. "Party tonight," Mason groaned immediately. "No." "Yes." "No." Tyler pointed dramatically. "My cousin's birthday. There will be free alcohol." Zane looked interested. "Continue." "There will also be attractive people." "I'm listening." "And apparently we're playing games." Mason sighed. "This sounds terrible." Zane jumped off the counter. "We're going." I looked toward my room. "I might skip." Zane immediately frowned. "You're not skipping. I have assignments." "You always have assignments." "I actually do." He stepped closer. Kareem. That voice. The one he used whenever he already knew he was going to win. "What?" "Come with us." "I don't know." "Please." Tyler looked between us. "Why do you sound like you're asking him to prom?" Zane threw a napkin at him. "Shut up." Everyone laughed except me, because for some reason my chest felt tight. Maybe it was the way Zane was looking at me. Maybe it was because lately he'd been acting different. Small things. Sitting closer on the couch, touching my shoulder while talking, keeping his hand there slightly longer than necessary. Sometimes I'd catch him staring. Not often, but enough. Enough that I started noticing, enough that I started wondering, and wondering was dangerous. By 8 o'clock, We arrived at Tyler's cousin's house. The place was packed. Music filled every room. People crowded the kitchen, and someone had already spilled something on the living room carpet. I immediately regretted coming. Zane seemed completely at home. He handed me a drink. You okay? Too many people. He smiled. Stay near me. Simple words, but they stayed with me. The night passed slowly. People talked, people drank. Someone started singing badly, Thais. At one point, a girl flirted openly with Zane near the kitchen. I watched him for exactly 2 seconds before forcing myself to look away, because that was normal. Girls liked Zane. Zane liked girls. End of story. Except 20 minutes later, he sat beside me on the couch. What happened to your conversation? He shrugged. Wasn't interested. Oh. He looked at me. What? Nothing. The music changed. Someone shouted from the other side of the room. Truth or dare? Immediately everyone started gathering. Tyler grinned. Oh no. Zane looked amused. This is either going to be amazing or terrible. I had absolutely no idea that one stupid game was about to change everything between us. The living room filled up quickly. People dragged chairs from the kitchen, somebody turned the music down, and suddenly there were 15 of us sitting in a rough circle on the floor. I immediately knew this was a bad idea. Truth or dare always turned into chaos after enough drinks. Zane sat beside me, his knee touching mine, because there wasn't enough room. He didn't move away. Neither did I. Tyler spun an empty bottle. Here we go. The first few rounds were harmless. Someone had to text their ex. Someone else admitted they failed a class. One guy danced in the middle of the room for 30 seconds while everyone laughed. I relaxed a little. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Then the bottle landed on Mason. Truth or dare? Tyler asked. Dare. Tyler grinned. Call your last date. Mason groaned. The room exploded with laughter. As the game continued, people became braver. The questions got more personal. The dares became more ridiculous. A girl had to sit on someone's lap. 2 guys had to sing a love song together. Someone admitted they had feelings for a coworker. Meanwhile, I was doing my best to avoid eye contact with the bottle. Zane looked completely relaxed beside me, too relaxed. He had only had a few drinks, but there was something different about him tonight. Quieter, more observant. Every so often I'd catch him looking at me, not long enough to say anything, just enough to notice. The bottle spun again, stopped, pointing directly at Zane. The room cheered. Finally, Tyler shouted. Zane laughed. Okay. Truth or dare? He leaned back slightly. Truth. Boring. Ask the question. Tyler smirked. Have you ever liked someone you weren't supposed to like? The room immediately reacted. Oh, that's a good one. Zane's smile faded just slightly. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely thoughtful. I looked down at my drink. I didn't know why my heart suddenly started beating harder. Zane rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah. The room quieted. Tyler blinked. Seriously? Yeah. Who? Zane shook his head. That's the second question. Everyone groaned. Come on. No way. You have to tell us. He smiled again. Truth only gives you one answer. Mason pointed at him. Coward. Zane laughed. Absolutely. The game moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about his answer. Someone he wasn't supposed to like. What did that even mean? A friend's ex? Someone unavailable? Someone in the room? I hated myself for wondering, because wondering led to hope, and hope usually ended badly. A few rounds later, the bottle landed directly in front of me. Tyler immediately pointed. Kareem! I sighed. Truth. No. Everyone laughed. Oh, you don't even know the question. I know how this works. Tyler grinned. Fine. Biggest crush you've ever had? My entire body froze. Absolutely not. Nope. You picked truth. I changed my mind. The room protested immediately. You can't do that. Rules. Answer. I felt heat climbing into my face. Because sitting directly beside me was the answer. Zane bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. You can lie. Tyler pointed dramatically. No lying. I swallowed. My biggest crush was in high school. Technically true. That's it? That's the answer. People complained, but Tyler eventually moved on. I could feel Zane watching me. High school? He asked quietly. I shrugged. Yep. You've never had a crush since then? His voice was casual. Too casual. I avoided his eyes. Not really. That was the biggest lie I'd told all year. The game continued. More drinks appeared. People got louder. At some point, the circle became smaller as people left for the kitchen or the backyard. By midnight, maybe 10 of us remained, and somehow Zane had moved even closer. His arm rested along the back of the couch behind me. Our legs touched constantly. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything. Then Tyler spun the bottle again. It landed between us. The entire room erupted. Double! Oh, this is good. Tyler looked far too excited. Okay, he pointed at us. Zane and Kareem. Zane laughed. Here we go. Truth or dare. Zane looked at me. I don't know why that mattered, but it did. Dare. The room cheered. Tyler looked positively evil. Oh, I know exactly what to do. My stomach dropped. No. You don't even know. I know your face. People started shouting suggestions. Take a shot. Switch phones. Tell secrets. Then Tyler grinned. Kiss someone in the room. Silence. A few people laughed. Someone whistled. My heart stopped, because Zane wasn't looking at the room. He was looking at me, just me. The entire world suddenly felt very quiet. Tyler spoke again. Anyone? Mason laughed. He's going to pick one of the girls. Probably, obviously. That's what made sense. Zane had his choice of almost anyone there. Instead, he stayed completely still. His expression changed. Something softer, something nervous. And for the first time all night, he looked genuinely uncertain. Kareem. My throat tightened. What? His eyes stayed on mine. If I did something really stupid, I frowned. What does that mean? A small smile appeared. I guess we're about to find out. And suddenly, nobody in the room was laughing anymore. Nobody said anything. The entire room had gone strangely quiet. Zane was still looking directly at me, and suddenly I became painfully aware of everything. The music playing somewhere in the kitchen, the people sitting around us, his knee pressed against mine, my own heartbeat. Tyler finally laughed. Dude, you're acting like you're about to jump off a building. Zane looked away for a second. Maybe I am. Everyone laughed except me, because something in his voice didn't sound like a joke. Mason leaned forward. Come on, man. Just kiss somebody. A girl across the room raised her hand dramatically. I volunteer. People laughed again. Normally Zane would have made a joke. Normally he would have smiled and moved on. Instead he stayed quiet. Then he looked at me again. Kareem. My mouth suddenly felt dry. What? He looked nervous. Actually nervous. I couldn't remember ever seeing Zane nervous. Would this make things weird? The room immediately reacted. Oh my God. No way. Wait. Tyler looked between us. Hold on. I stared at him, because surely I had misunderstood. Surely he wasn't asking me. My voice came out quieter than I expected. What are you talking about? His eyes never left mine. The dare. The air felt heavy. Nobody interrupted now. Nobody laughed. I could feel every person in the room watching us. My brain was screaming at me that this wasn't real. Zane was straight. Zane liked girls. Zane dated girls. But the way he was looking at me right now didn't feel like friendship, and that terrified me. You don't have to do it, I said. He smiled slightly. I know. Another few seconds passed. Long enough that somebody near the kitchen coughed awkwardly. Tyler finally spoke. Dude, seriously, there are like 6 girls in this room. Zane didn't even look at him. Instead, he asked me quietly, would it bother you? My chest tightened, because the truth was that I'd imagined this moment more times than I wanted to admit. And yet, now that it was actually happening, I had absolutely no idea what to do. I could have said no. Probably should have. Instead, I heard myself say, I don't know. Zane nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what I meant. He moved closer, only a few inches, but enough. Enough that I could smell his cologne, enough that I could see his expression clearly, and suddenly he looked just as nervous as I felt. "Okay," he said softly. Then he kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some movie moment. It was quick, careful, almost hesitant. Just his lips against mine for a few seconds before he pulled away. The entire room exploded. No way. Holy shit. Are you kidding me? Somebody nearly dropped their drink. Tyler looked like his brain had stopped functioning. Meanwhile, I couldn't move, because all I could think was, Zane just kissed me. My best friend. My straight best friend. He sat back slowly. His cheeks were slightly red, which somehow shocked me even more. Zane never blushed, ever. The room became chaos. "Dude!" "What was that?" "Since when?" "Are you guys secretly dating?" Mason pointed at us. I knew something was weird. "We are not dating," I managed. My voice sounded completely different. Zane rubbed his neck. "It was a dare." Tyler looked suspicious. "You had options." "Yeah. You literally had options sitting beside you." A girl raised her hand. Again, I volunteered. Everyone laughed. But something felt different now, because even after all the joking, Zane kept looking at me, not at anyone else, at me. The game somehow continued. I honestly don't remember most of it. My thoughts were completely scrambled. Thoughts were... Every few minutes I'd replay the kiss in my head, short, gentle, careful, like he was afraid. Around 1 a.m, people started leaving. Some went outside, others headed upstairs. The crowd slowly disappeared until only our group remained. Tyler stretched. "I need food." Mason agreed immediately. Everyone started discussing late-night burgers. I stood up. "I need air." Nobody stopped me except Zane. "I'll come." My stomach dropped. The backyard was quiet. Cool air replaced the heat of the crowded house. Music drifted faintly through the walls. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I leaned against the railing. Zane stood beside me. Finally, he said, "You okay?" I laughed quietly. "Are you serious?" "Fair." I looked at him. "Why did you do that?" He stared toward the yard. "The dare." No. He knew what I meant. Because Tyler was right. There had been other options. He could have kissed anybody. He chose me. Zane exhaled slowly. "I don't know." I frowned. "You don't know?" "I've been trying to figure it out." My heart started racing again. "What does that mean?" He stayed quiet. Long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Have you ever wanted something that wasn't supposed to happen?" I looked at him. And suddenly I remembered his truth from earlier, someone he wasn't supposed to like. The silence between us felt different now, more dangerous, more honest. Zane finally looked at me. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Kareem, I think I've been confused for a while." And for the first time since I've known him, Zane looked scared. The backyard suddenly felt much colder. The sounds from inside the house seemed far away now. People were laughing somewhere in the kitchen. Somebody had turned the music back up, and Tyler was apparently yelling about burgers. But none of that mattered, because Zane had just said something I never expected to hear. "I think I've been confused for a while." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "I honestly don't know." "Zane, no, seriously, I don't." For the first time in years, he didn't seem like himself. Usually he always had an answer. He always knew what to say. Now he looked completely lost. He leaned against the railing beside me. I've been trying to ignore it. My chest tightened. "Ignore what?" He laughed quietly. "That's the problem." The backyard light cast shadows across his face. He looked tired, nervous, and honestly scared. "I've dated girls," he said. "I've always liked girls." I nodded. "I know. But lately..." He stopped. I waited. His voice became quieter. "Lately, things haven't felt the same." I didn't know what to say, because part of me wanted to hear the words I had imagined for years. Another part of me was terrified. What changed? I finally asked. Zane looked directly at me, and that was somehow worse because I already knew. I just didn't want to hear it. He exhaled. You. My heart nearly stopped. For several seconds I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. What? He looked away immediately. See? This is why I didn't want to say anything. You mean me? He nodded. I think so. Think so. Not no. Think. Which somehow felt even more real, because Zane wasn't giving me some dramatic confession. He was admitting he was confused, admitting he didn't understand what was happening, and honestly, that made it harder. I don't get it, I said quietly. Neither do I. He laughed once, a nervous laugh. I started noticing things. What things? He looked embarrassed. Like when you talked about other guys. I blinked. What? I hated it. My stomach flipped. I thought you were just being protective. I thought so too. The silence stretched. He continued. Then you'd mention dates, or somebody texting you, and I'd get irritated. I remembered those moments, the questions, the weird reactions, the way he'd suddenly become quiet, the way he'd change the subject, the way he'd want to spend time with me afterward, and suddenly everything looked different. I didn't understand why, he said. I still don't. I looked down, because hearing this felt dangerous, very dangerous, because this was Zane, the person I'd wanted for years, the person I'd convinced myself I could never have, and now he was standing beside me, admitting he didn't understand his feelings. I finally asked, have you ever liked a guy before? He shook his head. No. Ever? No? And me? He was quiet for several seconds, then I don't know when it started. The honesty in his voice hurt, not because it was bad, because it felt real. No dramatic speech, no perfect confession, just honesty. I started wanting to be around you all the time. He smiled slightly, which wasn't exactly difficult because we lived together. I laughed. He continued. When you went on that coffee date last month, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I remembered Daniel, the economics student. The one Zane had asked about repeatedly. You were jealous? He looked embarrassed. Apparently. I stared at him, because none of this felt real. Inside the house, Tyler opened the back door. There you guys are. We both looked up. Tyler immediately stopped. Oh. He looked between us. Bad timing? Zane answered immediately. Very. Tyler raised both hands. Understood. He disappeared back inside. The door closed again. The silence returned. I finally said what had been sitting in my chest for years. You know, I like guys. Yeah. You know that changes things. I know. If you're confused, that's okay. Zane looked at me. But, I swallowed, but I can't be somebody you experiment with. The words hurt to say, but they needed to be said, because I knew myself, and I knew him. If I let myself believe something that wasn't real, it would destroy our friendship. Zane nodded slowly. I know. You kissed me. I know. And now you're telling me you don't know what you feel. He looked miserable. I know. I leaned against the railing. The cold air helped me think, because the truth was simple. I loved him. Maybe not literally, but close enough. And hearing him say these things made every feeling I'd buried come rushing back, which was terrifying. Finally, Zane asked quietly, Can I ask you something? I looked at him. Okay. He hesitated long enough that I wondered if he'd changed his mind. Then he said, Have you ever liked me? My entire body froze. Of course he would ask. Of course. Because now everything was out in the open. I laughed nervously. Zane. His expression softened. Please. For years I'd hidden it. For years I'd convinced myself he could never know. And now he was standing beside me after kissing me, asking me directly. The truth sat between us, heavy, terrifying, and suddenly I realized I was tired of lying. I looked down at my hands, then back at him. My voice came out almost as a whisper. Yeah. He didn't move, didn't speak. So I continued for a long time. The look on his face changed. Shock, real shock. You have? I laughed quietly. You really had no idea? He shook his head. No. Zane, everyone probably knew. I didn't. Well, I smiled sadly. I did a pretty good job hiding it. He stared at me, and somehow he looked even more overwhelmed than before. You liked me all this time? Yeah. Even when I talked about girls? Yeah. When I dated people? Yeah. He ran a hand through his hair. Kareem, his voice cracked slightly, and for the first time all night, neither of us knew what came next. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The backyard felt impossibly quiet now. Zane just stood there, staring at me. I could see his entire world rearranging itself in real time. You liked me, he repeated. I laughed softly. You're really stuck on that part. He shook his head. Kareem, we've lived together for almost a year. I know. We talk literally every day. I know. And you never said anything? I looked away toward the dark backyard. What was I supposed to say? He didn't answer because there wasn't really an answer. He had been straight. At least, that was what both of us believed. I didn't want to ruin things, I said quietly. Zane leaned against the railing beside me. You really thought I'd stop being your friend? No. Then what? I smiled sadly. I thought I'd make things weird. He laughed under his breath. Mission accomplished. That actually made me laugh. The tension eased slightly, just slightly. Inside the house, someone started singing loudly to music that definitely wasn't supposed to be sung loudly. Tyler yelled something, glass clinked. Normal sounds. Meanwhile, my entire life felt different. Zane looked down at his hands. When did it start? I thought about it. Honestly? Yeah. Second year. His eyes widened seriously. You wore that stupid green hoodie every day. The ugly one? The very ugly one. He looked offended. That hoodie was amazing. It was terrible. He laughed. And that's when you started liking me? I nodded. He shook his head. I had absolutely no idea. That was the goal. He became quiet again, the kind of quiet that meant he was thinking too much. I knew him well enough to recognize it. Finally he asked, So, when I kissed you, my stomach tightened. What about it? He looked genuinely nervous. Did you want me to? I met his eyes, because there wasn't any point lying anymore. Yeah. His expression changed, not surprise, something softer, something that made my chest hurt. Okay. He nodded. I just wanted to know. I folded my arms. Why? He hesitated, then, because I wanted to. The air left my lungs, Mike. He continued before I could speak. Not because of the dare. I stared at him. What? I mean, the dare made it easier. Easier? He nodded. I've been thinking about it. My heart immediately started racing again. Since when? He laughed nervously. I don't know. Zane. He looked embarrassed. Maybe a few weeks. A few weeks? Maybe longer. I genuinely couldn't process that, because while I'd spent years hiding my feelings, Zane was telling me he'd been thinking about kissing me, my best friend, the supposedly straight guy I'd convinced myself I could never have. Why didn't you say anything? He looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question imaginable, because I thought I was losing my mind. That answer made perfect sense. He rubbed the back of his neck. Kareem, I have literally never looked at another guy. I stayed quiet. I've never questioned anything before. His voice dropped. Then suddenly I'm jealous whenever you talk about somebody else. I swallowed. I'm thinking about you all the time. My heart pounded. And then tonight happened. He looked at me again. I kissed you. There was no joke in his voice, no hiding, just honesty, and somehow that made it harder. Because I wanted to believe him, I wanted to believe everything, but I was scared. You don't have to figure this out tonight. He nodded. I know. We can pretend this never happened. His eyes immediately met mine. Do you want to? The answer came too quickly. No. His shoulders relaxed. Just a little. Because apparently he'd been worried about the same thing. I laughed quietly. This is insane. Very. You're supposed to be straight. I know. And you're not helping? He smiled. Sorry. Another silence settled between us. This one felt different, less scary, more uncertain. Then the back door opened again. This time it was Mason. He looked between us. Should I leave? Zane answered immediately. Probably. Mason nodded. Understood. He started backing away, then stopped. By the way, Tyler ordered food. Neither of us moved. Mason pointed between us. And literally everybody inside thinks you're secretly dating. The door closed again. I covered my face. Oh my God. Zane laughed for the first time in several minutes. They're never going to let this go. Nope. He looked toward the house. We should probably go back inside. Probably. Neither of us moved, because stepping back inside meant facing everyone, facing questions, facing whatever this was. Zane looked at me carefully. Are we okay? The question surprised me because somehow, despite everything, he was worried about us, about our friendship. I answered honestly, I don't know. He nodded slowly. Fair. But, his eyes lifted, but I don't regret the kiss. The words hung between us, and the look on his face after I said them was something I'll probably remember forever. Not relief, not excitement, something warmer, something hopeful. He stepped a little closer, not enough to touch me, just enough that I could feel the tension between us again. Kareem? Yeah? His voice became quiet. So, I really wasn't terrible? I stared at him, then laughed. You're seriously asking that right now? He looked embarrassed. You said you liked me. I'm allowed to ask. I shook my head. You're unbelievable. So? I looked at him, really looked at him, at the nervous smile, the uncertainty, the guy who suddenly wasn't nearly as confident as he always seemed. It was kind of adorable. You weren't terrible. His smile grew. Good. The back door suddenly flew open again. Tyler pointed dramatically. Burgers are here. We both jumped. Tyler squinted at us. Did I interrupt another emotional moment? Neither of us answered. Tyler grinned. Oh my God. And suddenly I realized tomorrow morning was going to be very, very interesting. Walking back inside felt harder than the kiss. At least the kiss had happened quickly. Walking into a room full of people who absolutely knew something had happened between us was torture. The second Zane and I stepped into the kitchen, Tyler looked up from the counter. He immediately pointed at us. There they are. Mason looked suspicious. Why do both of you look like you just survived therapy? I grabbed a burger. I'm eating. Tyler wasn't giving up. So? No? So? No. Zane laughed beside me. Tyler looked directly at him. Did you two secretly get married outside? Tyler. I'm asking questions. Mason crossed his arms. I've known you guys for a year. Something is happening. Zane took a drink. Nothing's happening. Tyler looked offended. You kissed him. Once. With feeling. I don't know what that means. I know what that means. Everyone laughed. I wish the floor would open. Fortunately, food distracted most people. Conversations shifted. Somebody started arguing about movies. A few people left, but every so often I'd catch someone looking at me and Zane, mostly because Zane kept sitting beside me. Again, not across the room, not somewhere else. Beside me. At one point, Tyler leaned toward me, quietly. So, I looked at him. What? His expression softened. Are you okay? That surprised me because beneath all the jokes, Tyler was actually a good friend. I glanced toward Zane. He was talking with Mason. He looked calmer now, less scared. I don't know, I admitted. Tyler nodded. Fair. After a moment, he said, for what it's worth, he looks terrified. I looked again. He was right. Zane wasn't acting like somebody playing around. He looked overwhelmed, which somehow made me even more nervous. Around 2 a.m, people started leaving. Tyler arranged rides. Mason called an Uber. The party slowly emptied until only our apartment group remained. The drive home was strangely quiet. Mason sat in the front. I sat in the back. Zane sat beside me. Our shoulders touched every time the car turned. Neither of us moved. Nobody mentioned the kiss. Nobody mentioned the backyard conversation, but the silence felt full. When we finally reached our apartment, Mason stretched. "I'm sleeping for 14 hours. Tyler pointed toward us. "And tomorrow, we're having a conversation." "No, we're not," I said. "Yes, we are." Zane laughed. "Good night, Tyler." He disappeared into his room. Mason followed, and suddenly the apartment became quiet. Just me and Zane standing in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd eaten breakfast 100 times, the same kitchen where we'd argued over dishes and complained about classes. Except now, everything felt different. Zane looked exhausted. So, he rubbed his face. This is weird. A little. He leaned against the counter. "What happens now?" That was the question, the terrifying question, because honestly, I had no idea. I looked down. "You figure out what you're feeling." He nodded. "Okay." "And I try not to completely lose my mind." That made him smile. I'd appreciate that. We stood there for another moment. Neither of us wanted to go to our rooms, which felt important, because usually after parties, we'd say goodnight and disappear. Tonight, neither of us seemed ready. Finally, Zane spoke. "Can I ask one more thing?" "Sure." His expression became serious again. "When you said you've liked me for years, yeah? Were you ever going to tell me?" I thought about it. "No." His eyebrows lifted. "Never?" I shook my head. "You were my best friend." So? "So I would have rather had you in my life than risk losing you." He looked down. Something about that answer affected him. I could see it. After a moment, he said quietly, "You wouldn't have lost me. Maybe, maybe not, but neither of us could change the past." I yawned. The entire night was finally catching up to me. Zane noticed. "We should sleep." "Probably." He nodded. Then neither of us moved. Again, I laughed. "This is getting ridiculous." "A little." I started toward my room. Halfway there, his voice stopped me. "Kareem." I turned. He looked nervous again, and suddenly I remembered the version of him from earlier, the guy who asked if the kiss would make things weird. The guy who admitted he was confused, the guy who looked terrified. "Yeah?" He hesitated, then, "Can I hug you?" Of all the things I expected him to ask, that wasn't one of them. "What?" He looked embarrassed. I don't know why I said it like that. I smiled. "You don't need permission to hug me." He walked over slowly, and when he wrapped his arms around me, everything inside me went quiet. Because Zane had hugged me hundreds of times. Quick hugs, friendly hugs, celebration hugs. This wasn't one of those. He held me tightly, long enough that I could hear his breathing, long enough that neither of us wanted to let go. When he finally stepped back, his expression had softened. "Good night. Good night." I walked into my room, closed the door, sat on my bed, and stared at the wall for nearly 20 minutes, because my straight best friend had kissed me, told me he might like me, admitted he'd been jealous, hugged me like something had changed between us. And tomorrow morning, I was going to wake up and see him again. That scared me almost as much as it excited me, because for the first time in years, hope had become a real thing. And hope can be dangerous, especially when the person you want is sleeping 20 feet away. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the entire night. The kiss, the backyard, the conversation, the hug. At some point around 4 a.m, I finally fell asleep. Then my phone alarm went off at 9. I immediately remembered everything, which somehow felt worse. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Part of me wanted to stay there all day. Part of me wanted to walk across the hall and make sure last night had actually happened. Eventually, hunger won. I opened my bedroom door and nearly walked directly into Zane. We both stopped. "Oh, hey." The hallway suddenly felt very small. He looked just as tired as I felt. Messy hair, grey t-shirt, and slightly nervous expression. Neither of us seemed to know how to act. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Not really." "Same." We stood there awkwardly for several seconds. Then Tyler walked out of his room. He looked at both of us, looked back at both of us. Oh my God. Tyler. No. He pointed dramatically. Why are you both standing here like divorced parents? Zane rubbed his face. It's 9 a.m. Exactly. Tyler walked toward the kitchen. I'm making coffee and pretending I don't know anything. He paused. Until later. The apartment slowly woke up. Mason appeared. Someone ordered breakfast. The television turned on. Normal things. But underneath everything, there was tension. Not bad tension, just awareness. Every time Zane entered a room, I noticed. Every time our eyes met, he looked away first. And every time somebody mentioned the party, Tyler smirked. Around noon, Mason left to see his girlfriend. Tyler went to work. Suddenly the apartment became quiet, just me and Zane again, and Zane. He sat on the couch. I sat in the chair across from him. This somehow felt more difficult than the backyard, because now we were sober, completely sober, no party, no alcohol, no excuses. Zane finally broke the silence. So, I laughed. We say so a lot, apparently. He leaned forward. I've been thinking. That made me nervous immediately. Okay. He took a breath. I don't regret last night. My chest tightened. Okay. I know I said I'm confused. You are. Yeah. He looked down. But I know I meant it. The room became very quiet. The kiss? He nodded. And everything else. I didn't know what to say, because hearing those words felt dangerous. Again. Hope. Hope was dangerous. He continued, I've spent my entire life thinking I knew who I was. I listened. And then suddenly, he laughed quietly. You happen. I smiled slightly. Sorry. He smiled too. You're really not helping my situation. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other. Then he asked, would it be weird if I wanted to take things slowly? I blinked. Well, what things? He looked embarrassed. Us. My heart started racing again. Zane. I'm serious. And he rubbed his hands together nervously. I don't know exactly what this is. Neither do I. But I want to figure it out. Those words settled between us, simple, honest, terrifying, because a part of me had expected him to wake up and regret everything, to blame the alcohol, to pretend it never happened. Instead, he was sitting in front of me, asking to take things slowly. Are you sure? I asked. No? That answer surprised me. No? He shook his head. I'm sure about you. I stared at him. He continued. I'm not sure about myself yet. That might have been the most honest thing anybody had ever said to me, because he wasn't promising something impossible. He wasn't pretending to understand everything. He was simply telling me the truth. I can do slow, I said. His shoulders relaxed. Yeah? Yeah? He smiled, a real smile, the one I knew so well. And suddenly he looked more like himself. The rest of the afternoon felt strangely normal. We watched television, ordered food, talked about classes. At one point we argued about a movie. It almost felt like nothing had changed, except everything had. Around evening, Zane disappeared into his room for nearly an hour. When he finally came out, he looked nervous again. Can we go for a walk? I nodded. The weather had cooled. The streets around campus were mostly quiet. We walked side by side without speaking much. Eventually, we reached the small park near our apartment. We sat on a bench. Zane stared ahead. I've been scared all day. I looked at him. Why? Because what if I ruin this? You won't? What if I do? I thought about it. About 4 years of friendship, late-night conversations, inside jokes, movie nights, everything. Then I answered honestly, you'd have to try pretty hard. He laughed softly. Good. The sun had started setting. Orange light filtered through the trees. People walked past. Nobody paid attention to us. Zane finally turned toward me. His expression had changed again. Less fear, more certainty. Kareem? Yeah? I know I kissed you because of the dare. I stayed quiet. But if there hadn't been a dare... He swallowed. I think I would have done it eventually. My heart nearly stopped. You do? He nodded. I was already thinking about it. I couldn't stop smiling. He noticed. What's that look? Nothing. That's definitely something. I looked down, then back at him. I just never thought this would happen. His expression softened. Me neither. The air between us felt different now, less uncertain, still complicated, still scary, but different. And then Zane did something that made my heart completely lose control. He reached over and took my hand, very carefully, like he was still making sure it was okay. Our fingers intertwined. He looked nervous. He looked. I squeezed his hand. His smile appeared immediately, and for the first time since the party, neither of us seemed afraid. Because whatever this was, it had become real. I don't think either of us expected holding hands to feel so important. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody was watching. Nobody even noticed us sitting on that bench. But for me, it felt bigger than the kiss, because the kiss had happened during a game. This was a choice. Zane looked down at our hands. I've never done this before. I smiled. You're doing okay. He laughed quietly. Good. We stayed there until the sun disappeared completely. The evening air became colder, but neither of us seemed ready to go home. Eventually Zane spoke. Can I ask something else? You ask a lot of questions now. I'm going through a crisis. I laughed. Fair. He looked genuinely nervous again. If we try this, my heart jumped. And I figure out I was wrong. I interrupted him. Zane. He looked at me. You don't have to promise me forever. He stayed quiet. I know this is new for you. It is. And I know you're scared. He nodded. But I would rather you be honest with me than tell me what you think I want to hear. For several seconds he didn't speak. Then he squeezed my hand. Thank you. We eventually walked back toward the apartment. The entire walk felt lighter somehow, not because everything was solved, nothing was solved, but the fear had started disappearing. When we reached our building, Zane stopped outside the entrance. Kareem? Yeah? He looked nervous, again. Honestly, seeing Zane nervous had become my favorite thing. What if I want to kiss you again? My heart immediately started racing. I looked around. The parking lot was empty. The street was quiet. The apartment windows above us glowed softly. I looked back at him. Then kiss me. This time, there was no dare. No audience, no game, just us. Zane stepped closer. He moved slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. His hand gently touched my face, and when he kissed me this time, it felt completely different, longer, softer, certain. There was still nervousness there, but there was also something else. Choice. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were smiling. He looked almost surprised. Okay. What? I definitely wanted to do that. I laughed. Good. We went upstairs. The apartment was quiet, except for the television. Tyler was sitting on the couch. He looked up, saw us, narrowed his eyes. Something happened. Nope, Zane said. Tyler pointed. You have the exact same expression. We're tired. Tyler looked unconvinced. Mason walked out of his room. He looked at us, then at Tyler, then back at us. Oh my God. I immediately walked toward my room. No. Zane laughed. Tyler stood up dramatically. I knew it. You know nothing. I know everything. Mason crossed his arms. So are we celebrating or no? Or both of us said simultaneously. The two of them burst out laughing. For the first time all weekend, I didn't care. Because later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I heard a quiet knock on my door. I opened it. Zane stood there, wearing sweatpants, looking nervous again. Hey. He rubbed the back of his neck. I can't sleep. I smiled. Me neither. He looked down, then back at me. Can I stay here for a little while? My heart did that stupid thing again. Yeah. He sat beside me on the bed. For a while we just talked about everything, about high school, about his old relationships, about me coming out, about fear, about confusion, about what happened next. At some point, he became quiet. You know what's weird? What? I spent years thinking I knew exactly who I was. I listened. And then one stupid game of truth or dare changes everything. I smiled. I think it started before the game. He laughed. Probably. He looked at me, really looked at me. I think I've liked you longer than I realized. My chest tightened. You do? He nodded. I just didn't know what it was. The room became quiet. Outside, rain had started falling lightly against the windows. Zane leaned back against the headboard. I'm still scared. I know. But, he smiled, I think you're worth being scared for. I don't think I'll ever forget those words, because after years of hiding my feelings, after years of believing nothing would ever happen, after years of convincing myself that Zane would only ever be my straight best friend, he chose to stay, not because of a dare, not because of a game, because he wanted to. Eventually he stood up. At the door he stopped. Kareem, yeah? His smile appeared. Good thing I picked dare. I laughed. Definitely. He walked across the hallway to his room, and for the first time in years I fell asleep smiling, because sometimes the person you never thought would choose you does. And sometimes one stupid game of truth or dare changes absolutely everything.